Hello, and welcome to this lecture on ethical theories as part of the professional ethics and computing model. Today, we are exploring ethical theories, the foundational ideas that guide how we make moral decisions and how they apply to computing and technology. The goal isn't just to memorize ethical theories, but to understand how each one helps us to think critically about real world dilemma like privacy, bias, algorithms, or whistleblowing. As computer scientists, we're shaping the world through codes. We so understanding ethics isn't optional; it is central to professional practice. Um, uh, let's begin by reminding ourselves what ethics means. Ethics is a branch of philosophy that examines what is right and wrong, good and bad. In computing, ethics helps us decide how to design and use technology responsibly, from data collection to possibly AI decision making or stages. Think of it as a framework for reasoning about the consequences of your professional actions. So, in the field of computer science, ethical considerations are paramount, influencing the design, the development, implementation, and impact of technology on society. So, this lecture aims to underscore the importance of ethical frameworks in guiding practitioners to make informed and reasonable decisions that align with our societal values and expectations. So, now we have defined ethics generally. Let us look at the four main categories of ethics. This will help us to see how ethical reasoning operates at different levels, from theory to practice. Think of them as layers, from asking what is right to how people behave, to how we apply these ideas, and finally, what morality itself means. So the first branch of or type of ethics is normative ethics, which establishes moral standards. Normative ethics involves the formulation of moral standards that dictate what behaviors are considered right or wrong. It provides a framework for how we evaluate actions based on ethical principles, uh, guiding moral decision making in various contexts, including computer science. So, normative ethics is probably what most people think about when they hear ethics. It is about setting standards. What should we do, and how should we live? This is where ethical theories belong. For example, if you're designing an AI system, normative ethics will guide you to ask, is it right to prioritize efficiency over fairness, for instance? So, we also have descriptive ethics. Descriptive ethics doesn't tell us about what we should do, or instead, it observes what people believe about ethics in real world. So it focuses on understanding how individuals and cultures actually behave, or what moral beliefs they hold. So it's more sociological, like studying how developers in different cultures view data sharing, or how companies differ in their ethical policies. Through empirical research, it analyzes real world behaviors, providing insights into varying ethical practices across different societies. In computer science, for instance, this might involve researching how tech professionals actually behave when faced with privacy dilemma. In addition to that, we have applied ethics, which involves the practical application of ethical theories to real world issues, um, uh, particularly in bioethics is an example, business ethics, technology ethics. These are examples of applied ethics. This is where theory meets practice. It takes the principles of normative ethics and applies them to specific areas. So when we debate things like facial recognition, algorithmic bias, or cybersecurity, we are doing applied ethics because it addresses specific dilemmas and challenges while guiding professionals in making morally sound decisions. So this is the level where relevant, possibly relevant to your professional lives, because you will constantly face real world decisions that require ethical reflections. So when you make those decisions in practice, you're doing applied ethics. So finally, we have another type of ethics, uh, which is called meta ethics, which explores or focuses on theoretical aspects of ethics, exploring the meaning of ethical terms and concepts and the nature of moral judgments. Um, so it Meta ethics asks questions like, what does good even mean? Can moral truths exist independently of human opinion? Um, so it questions the objectivity or subjectivity of ethical statements, contributing to a deeper understanding of how ethical principles are formulated. So it is a bit more philosophical, but important here. For example, when we say an algorithm is fair, what do we really mean by fairness? Is it measurable? Is it subjective? Uh, so these questions matter because how we define ethical terms affects how we design and evaluate technology. Uh, so Normative ethics, just as I pointed out earlier, establishes moral or principles universally, guides ethical decision making processes, addresses moral dilemmas and conflicts, while also incorporating cultural and social context. But most importantly, it serves as a foundation for applied ethics. On the other hand, descriptive ethics is about behavioral patterns, observing behavioral patterns in ethics, the cultural influences on ethics, the sociological methods employed in making moral judgments, and the moral relativity concept of ethics. So there is a difference between the descriptive and the normative types of ethics. But it's important for us to understand the philosophical differences here. While applied ethics, it's about the practical applications of the of normative ethical principles in different fields. So for us now, it will be ethics in applied ethics in technology here. While these ethical frameworks help in decision making processes in professions, so there are real case and real world impact of applied ethics, and then it helps us to navigate moral dilemmas in our professions. And there's an interdisciplinary approach here to ethics. So let us go deeper into understanding meta ethics here. So, as I mentioned earlier, meta ethics goes a step above the what we should do question of normative ethics. Instead, it asks what we even mean when we use ethical language. For example, when we say it is wrong to violate user privacy, meta ethics asks, what does wrong really mean? Is it a fact, or an emotion, or just a social convention? So it is about clarifying the language of ethics, we can have meaningful discussions without uh, talking past each other here. So in computer science, this matters because when we debate topics like fair AI or responsible AI, we need shared definitions and a shared understanding of what we mean by responsibility, what we mean by fairness. If one's idea of fairness is statistical parity and another individual's idea is about equity, then our ethical debate loses clarity. So, meta ethics delves into the semantics of moral languages, seeking to clarify what we mean when we use terms such as right, wrong, good, fairness, responsibility, evil. It distinguishes between the use of these terms in normative discussions and their practical implications. So also, you can also see that meta ethics examines what kind of claims moral judgments are. For instance, some people or scholars that we call cognitivists will say that moral statements are or can be true or false. For instance, discriminatory AI is wrong. If I say that, could this be objectively true, like scientific statements? Uh, Non cognitivists will disagree here, and they will say moral statements don't describe facts but express emotions or attitudes. So saying data theft is wrong is more like saying no to data theft. But as an expression of disapproval. The distinction matters in computer ethics because it affects how we argue. If moral judgments are factual, we can appeal to evidence and reason. But if they are emotional or cultural, we may need to appeal to shared values instead. So, meta ethics is also or seeks to understand the foundations upon which we base our moral evaluations. So, this includes maybe the exploration of whether moral judgments are expressions of emotional or responses or objective truths. The objectivity versus subjectivity in ethics is also maybe one of the biggest debates in meta ethics. Are moral truths objective or subjective? If ethics is objective, then actions like spreading misinformation or invading privacy are always wrong, regardless of culture and context. If it is subjective, moral rules might depend on social norms, meaning uh, what's considered ethical in one society or company might differ in another. The objectivity versus subjectivity debate, in essence, it's about whether moral truths exist independently of human beliefs, objective, or if they are constructed by social agreements and personal sentiments. For computer science, this has huge implications. For example, global companies like all the big tech companies, Google, Meta, they operate across cultures. What counts as ethical AI use in the UK might differ from AI use in China or Kenya in Africa. So objectivity versus subjectivity shapes how we design system, write our code, or define universal standards like fairness, transparency, and accountability. So this is an important debate or an important discussion in ethics for us. So there are There are three ethical theories that we are going to explore in this lecture. One is utilitarianism, the second one is deontology, and then virtue ethics. Utilitarianism is an ethical theory that is consequentialist in nature, which means that it judges actions based on its outcomes rather than intentions. It believes that best action is the one that maximizes overall happiness or utility. Uh, and evaluates moral actions based on their outcome, just as I mentioned earlier, often leading to a focus on the greatest good for the greatest number. In computer science, decisions about algorithms or data use can be assessed through a utilitarian lens, weighing the benefits against the potential harm. It was Jeremy Bentham who introduced the idea of the principle of utility. The best action is the one that brings about the greatest happiness for the greatest number. John Stuart Mill later refined this by emphasizing the quality of happiness, not just quantity. For example, intellectual or moral satisfaction may count for more than mere physical pleasure. So, in computing, utilitarian reasoning often appears in design and policy decisions. Should we collect user data to improve the services, even if it slightly compromises privacy? If the benefits to millions outweigh the cost to a few, utilitarianism might say yes. However, this can also justify harmful trade offs in most cases. Like prioritizing majority benefits while ignoring minority harm. So, and so far we have just introduced utilitarianism as focusing on outcomes, but there are actually two versions of utilitarianism: act utilitarianism and rule utilitarianism. They share the same goal of maximizing happiness, but they differ in how they make ethical decisions. For act utilitarianism, if a particular action leads to more happiness than harm, it is considered morally right, even if that means breaking a rule. For instance, suppose a cybersecurity analyst decides to break into a system to expose vulnerability that could save millions of users' data. Even though hacking is normally wrong, an act utilitarian might justify it by if the immediate outcome outweighs overall benefit. On the other hand, rule utilitarianism focuses on following general rules that, if everyone followed them, would produce the greatest happiness in the long run. So instead of judging one act at a time, there's an evaluation of whether a rule leads to better outcomes overall. So, using the same example of a cybersecurity analyst hacking into a system, a rule utilitarian might say that allowing hacking, even for good causes, could erode trust in cybersecurity and create more harm over time. So, the ethical choice is to follow the rule against hacking, while society benefits more when rules are upheld. So, the second theory we're going to explore is deontology. Deontology or deontological ethics shifts the focus from outcomes to intentions and rules. So it's about duty and moral rules. Um, Immanuel Kant argued that certain actions are right or wrong in themselves, regardless of consequences. Immanuel Kant is maybe the father of deontology, which believes that morality is grounded in adherence to rules and duties rather than consequences of the actions. We have Immanuel Kant's categorical imperatives, which serves as a foundational principle advocating that individuals should act according to maxims that can be universally applied as moral law. The golden rule will be an example of a categorical imperative here. For instance, always tell the truth or never treat people merely as tools for their own goals. So, in computing, a deontological approach means following ethical principles like privacy, fairness, and honesty, even when breaking them might lead to better outcomes. For example, a developer might refuse to sell user data not because it will cause harm, but because it is simply wrong to violate consent protocols. So these aligns closely with professional codes of ethics like the ACM or BCS codes, which we learned a few weeks ago, and these are grounded in duty-based reasoning. So the final ethical theory here, it's based on character and moral excellence, and it's called virtue ethics. This takes more of a person-centered approach. Instead of asking, "What should I do?" it asks, "What kind of person should I be?" So virtue ethics emphasizes the cultivation of moral character or virtues as the foundation for ethical behavior. It believes that ethical decision making is not solely about adhering to rules or maximizing outcomes, but about embodying virtues such as honesty, courage, integrity, which foster a morally excellent individual. Aristotle argued that morality isn't just about rules or outcomes, but about cultivating virtues, traits of good character that help us make wise decisions. So, virtue comes from habit and practice. Just as you develop coding skills through repetition, you develop moral virtues through consistent ethical behavior. So, in computing, this might mean developing virtues like integrity, being honest in your work, prudence, thinking ahead about consequences, and courage, speaking out against unethical practices. So, virtue ethics is particularly useful for professional ethics because it focuses on building trustworthy practitioners or computer scientists, not just rule followers here. So, I want us to maybe understand or demonstrate the understanding of these ethical theories through a case study, and the case study here is the VW Volkswagen emission scandal. I don't know how many of you remember the Volkswagen recall of a few years ago. In 2015, Volkswagen admitted to uh, using special software in millions of its diesel cars. The software could dictate when a vehicle was undergoing emissions testing and could automatically reduce engine emissions to meet regulatory limits. However, when driven normally on the road, these cars emitted far more nitrogen oxides in some cases, up to 40 times the legal limit. So the scandal affected about 11 million cars globally and led to billions in fines and lawsuits and a huge loss of public trust in the VW. Um, so this is maybe a powerful ethical case study here because it highlights the tension between corporate goals like profit and market share and moral duties such as honesty, transparency, and social responsibility. Um, so it highlights the manipulation of emission tests, but also raises critical questions about corporate responsibility, consumer trust, and the broader implications for environmental ethics. So, but how would somebody who leans towards utilitarianism or the ontology of virtue ethics understand this case? So, applying utilitarian principles to this case, in this context, the VW emission scandal involves weighing the overall consequences of the company's actions. While the company may have experienced immediate financial gains, the long term environmental damage and the loss of trust among consumers and stakeholders raises questions about the net harm cost. So ultimately, the assessment can reveal that the harm inflicted on society and the environment outweighs the short term benefits. And that is how a utilitarian will assess this situation here. So, going deeper into the cost benefit analysis of this in this sense, in terms of utility and value, uh, you can see that there's an estimated excess emissions of pollutants due to the scandal about estimated financial losses about over 30 million, including fines and lawsuits. Uh, you see the number of cars being affected globally, and then 20% decrease in consumer trust reflected in sales and post scandal. And then, while they only maybe had immediate financial gain of $1.5 billion, so you can see that it is a utilitarian will say that the consequences maybe well the benefits, and then a deontologist would then assess it differently, completely differently, where from a deontological perspective, the company's actions represent a clear violation of moral duties to various stakeholders. So the company failed its duty to consumers through misleading advertising and compromised uh, its obligation to regulators by not adhering to environmental laws. And then, from a virtue ethics, because there is a clear ethical obligations to stakeholders that they didn't uphold, and then there is transparency in business practice that they also didn't uphold, and there were also issues of accountability for ethical breaches. There was a long-term reputational impact that they should have considered here, and I also consider building trust through integrity. But then the virtue or ethics will also assess it differently, because this scandal highlights a deficiency in corporate virtues such as honesty, transparency, and responsibility. So, by engaging in deceitful practices, the company not only tarnished its reputation but also eroded trust within the automotive industry. So, a commitment to virtuous principles could have steered the company towards ethical decision making. So, it is important here for us to understand that there are different interpretations of the same issue when we look at it from different ethical theories lenses. So, by examining virtues that should guide corporate behavior, we can understand the broader implications of ethical lapses within organizations here. So, the it is important for us to understand that in an era where technology is impacting society on different levels, understanding ethical frameworks is paramount for computer scientists. Ethical considerations guide responsible innovation, which ensures that technological advancements prioritize human welfare and environmental sustainability. So, okay. Final thoughts here. It is important for us to understand that ethical frameworks inform practices and corporate responsibilities influences ethics and also other professional practices. And quantifying ethics poses some challenges. And when we use case studies to illustrate ethical dilemmas, it helps us to find better ways of addressing them. And ethics definitely shapes public perceptions of what we do as computer scientists, our designs, our development, our implementation of these designs. So this is the lecture, and if you have questions, please do ask. Thank you.